It takes a sturdy people to live in a place like this, where you can't just walk out your front door in January and pick a lemon off the tree, where survival seems to be as much a part of the lifeblood of who we are and what we're about. The Great Plains has a way of testing people, forcing us to learn to survive, lest we wither away in the face of drought and flood, blazing summer sun and freezing cold winters. It's not easy to live in a place like this sometimes, where life itself seems to be on the edge so often. Some folks might say we stay because we're stubborn, and there might be something to that, but I'll never admit it. But I think that there's something deeper too that we know, something that helps us survive the hard times. We know that gratitude in the face of struggle and loss is just as important as celebration when times are good. We know that every people who have ever lived in this place, the Comanche, the Kiowa, the Cherokee, the Wildcatters, the Homesteaders, the people of Greenwood Avenue, the people of this church, we all know that if we are going to live in a place like this, we'd better know something about appreciating life. Because next year the rains might not come, the oil market might collapse, an ice storm might leave us without power for days or weeks. My family has a practice we use to help remind us to be grateful. Every week, when we sit down to dinner at our dining room table, we reach our hands out in a circle, and we stop, and we share something that we are thankful for. It's a family ritual we started years ago when my eldest daughter, Olivia, was quite small. And it's one of the few family rituals we've tried over the years that's actually stuck. It's a way that we transfer our energy from whatever was going on before we sat down to the people that we are with. But sometimes it's not easy to find something to be grateful for. Sometimes work was hard, or school didn't go well, or people are sick, or any of 100 other things that could have gone wrong that day. And still we sit there at that table together, holding hands, trying to welcome each of us back over that shared meal. And sometimes the most that we can come up for is that we are thankful for the food in front of us. Thankful that we have something to eat when everything else feels like it's gone so wrong. Most of us have had that feeling from time to time. Some of us much more often than that. The kinds of days or weeks or months where struggle seems to be the watchword. Years ago, I went to a talk given by a man who had written a book about long-lasting marriages. He interviewed men who had been married for 40 and 50 and 60 years. I asked him, as someone who was newly married at the time, what he had learned from those interviews. And he said something that has stuck with me ever since, because it surprised me. You see, I was expecting him to say something about love or sticking together through thick and thin. Something about how the men told him to always remember your wife's birthday and her favorite color. Or, we had a few tough years starting back in '67, but we made it through with love. What he said instead was this. The thing that surprised me the most, he said, was how many of these men I spoke to who told me, yeah, that was a tough decade. As someone who's even now only been married a few short 6 years, the idea that there were going to be tough decades left me wondering what would sustain us through those long years. Finding something to be thankful for can be difficult when you're in the middle of a hard time like that. Maybe your house was broken into by someone looking for some electronics and a quick buck. Maybe you lost your job, or the plant closed and the company went bankrupt, and you don't know if or when you'll ever find work again. Maybe it wasn't just a tough decade. Maybe there was something irreconcilably different. And instead of lasting 40 or 50 years, you find yourself in divorce court with someone you once loved. Whatever it is, if your life is in a tailspin, this time of national Thanksgiving we have this week can feel a lot like Valentine's Day does for the single people. As though everyone else gets to join in the celebration except for you. But the power of that dining room ritual we have at our table, the power of Thanksgiving, comes because we practice it even when times are tough. Even when everything is awful and giving thanks is the last thing you feel like doing. When your life feels like it's a drought and it's been too long since the rain has come and even a sprinkle would be much appreciated. I noticed this especially last week. I was greeting people as they came in for the 8:30 service, and more than a few of you told me how grateful you were for the rain we'd finally got. We were having rain at that very moment. Many of you were even rushing to get inside, and yet you were grateful. It's been nearly a month since we had any rain at all, and this year's been dry. Not just this year, the last few. So I found myself this past week wandering through old diaries and climate records, reflecting on what we've learned over the years about making it through the dry times. Later this evening, the newest Ken Burns documentary will be released, based on a book, The Worst Hard Time. It's about something that Oklahomans know all too well: the dirty 30s, the Dust Bowl. It was a time when things weren't just difficult. They were apocalyptic. Dust storms picked up year after year and blew away the fields, darkened the skies, and sent precious topsoil as far away as Washington, D.C., and even ships 300 miles off the Atlantic coast could see the dust coming in. Okies fled the state seeking work in places like Steinbeck's, California, picking grapes or whatever someone would pay them to do. But the source of that problem started years before the drought did, when people began to plow up land that was marginal to begin with, and put in wheat and corn that depended on rain that wasn't usually there. The 20s, you see, especially the late 20s, were a wet decade, with better than average rain, and people got lured into believing it would always be that way. Boosters promoted farming on the high plains by putting out ads in newspapers across the country showing farmers sitting on cabbages the size of a Fiat 500 and cobs of corn the size of a modern tanker truck. People say pictures don't lie, but manipulation of photographs went on long before Photoshop was invented. And most of the high plains was only ever good for growing broom corn and winter wheat, even when there was rain. But the rain of the 20s didn't last, and the fields were left exposed. And our lives can be like that too. Dried out, wondering what will let us make it through this tough, hard, dry year. The 30s were drier than just about anyone could remember. except for the old cowboys who'd been there since it was Indian territory, who remembered what it was like before the grass was turned over and the prairie broken. And after year of drought dried out the earth, and the ever-present wind blew and blew, there were storms so great, so bad, that old people and children died of dust pneumonia. Static electricity from the wind and dirt floating around literally shocked crops to death. Survivors tell of mothers who were so afraid of what was happening, they thought they should just kill themselves and their children, because surely the world was ending. And it was hard to find something to be grateful for. But gratitude is part of what it takes to survive the tough times. And the ones who stayed know that. It's part of what makes us who we are today. The descendants, both literally and culturally, of those who stuck it out when times were tough. Descendants of women like Mary Dick, a farm wife out in western Kansas, near the Oklahoma and Colorado state lines. And when she died in the 50s, she left behind a set of diaries that tell us about those worst, hard times. You see, by 1937, she and her husband had been through year after year of hard times. They were closing in on completing that difficult decade that I was cautioned about in marriage. But I want to share with you something from her diary in 1937, because I think she knew something we all need to be reminded of from time to time. And I want to start with the day before Thanksgiving, November 24th of 1937. She wrote, "Mo had the milking all done. She walked till the draw east of here and milked the brown cow. She sunk down deep into the blow piles, 1 foot deep in the draw, while milking the cow. After getting this cow milked, the rusty red one had walked home. So then she had the pleasure of milking that one, while she could sit on a stool instead of sitting on her shins. After coming in the house, she had to pour the dirt out of her shoes." The next day was Thanksgiving, and her entry started this way. "Well, this was a beautiful day. No wind, just a breeze. This day was certainly beautiful, without anything else to be thankful for." Without anything else to be thankful for. Without anything else to be thankful for and grateful just to be able to sit on a stool and milk the cow. It is difficult to imagine for most of us how hard the times were for those dust bowlers, even as we go through a drought ourselves. I know that when I am feeling overwhelmed, weighted down by the world, it can feel like I am the only one who's ever faced hard times. Like I'll be grateful when it's through. But those times when it feels like there is nothing to be thankful for, I am reminded and inspired by women like Mary Dick, and by members of this congregation who know something about giving thanks, even when times are tough. Recently, Maureen and Mike Thornton had their house catch on fire. No one died, but Maureen suffered some smoke inhalation, and Mike's face was injured as they escaped the blaze. A lot of property damage was done to boot. And at a time like that, it would have been easy to say, "Woe is me," and ask questions like, "What did I do to deserve this?" But that's not what happened. Instead, Maureen wrote a letter she said I could share with you this morning. It reads like this. We had a devastating house fire in the middle of the night, Sunday night. We got out basically unharmed, and all of our pets survived. Our house is in pretty bad shape, but it can be repaired. Material things don't matter. Lives do. We know we are so lucky to be alive. It's a miracle as our bedroom is at the back of the house. The noise of the fire itself woke us up. Although, she writes, a major house fire was not on our to-do list for 2012, we are just counting our many blessings that the outcome could have been very different. Each week, as this church gathers together, we bring attention to the things that we are grateful for. We say, let us be grateful for the capacity to see, feel, hear, and understand. Let us be especially grateful for the incredible gift of life, for the ties of love which bind us together, giving dignity, meaning, worth, and joy to all of our days. We say these words every week, regardless of how good or bad it has been, even when we don't always want to. When a staff member has been murdered, when a minister's daughter has died, when our nation or state has been attacked, and after every election, no matter how we felt about the outcome. And just as Mary found out about something to be thankful for in the wake of those 7 years of hard times in the Dust Bowl, we say these words. We say them the same as Maureen and Mike, who found something to be thankful for, even though their house was nearly destroyed. Just as each one of us is offered the chance this Thanksgiving to be thankful and reflect back whether times have been good or bad this year. We know that surviving hard times means being thankful, that we survive by gratitude, and that so many of the most grateful people we know are those who have been through the worst hard times. The words of our invocation remind us that each day is a blessing, and within it there are blessings to be found. Blessings sometimes hidden away, unseen because we forget what we once knew. It's that gift of understanding that helps in the dry times, when the rain doesn't come and our fields have gone dry. Sometimes we can be thankful for merely what we have learned from the hardships we have survived, so that when the rains don't come, our whole lives don't blow away. You see, the other thing that most folks don't know about the Dust Bowl years is they weren't the worst drought in our history. This year's been drier than the Dust Bowl years were, and the 50s even more so. Unless Tulsa County gets 6 to 10 inches of rain in November and December this year, we will come short of every single year of the 1930s. But without the storms of dust and dirt that came with them. And so we find ourselves, knowingly or not, grateful for the learning that keeps this year from being the worst hard times. Grateful for the work of members of this church, like W.R. Hallway, a founding member of this church who engineered the dam that still brings us drinking water and water to wash with, whether there's been rain or not. Grateful that the ground stays put, and the men and women who work the land and tend their fields and pastures do so in ways so the Dust Bowl never returns. There is much to be grateful for. And no matter whether you will join your family for a Thanksgiving meal, or friends, or go to a community center like Hope and join with friends and strangers alike, for everyone in this room, there will be a place to get out of the cold and a meal to eat. So this year, I want you to be invited to do something more. I want you to take 10 minutes of your Thanksgiving day. Sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and start writing down the things that you are thankful for. While those potatoes are bubbling away or the turkey is roasting in the oven, just write down and keep writing. And keep it when you are done. Store it away somewhere you can find it easily. And then, when those difficult days come, and they will inevitably come, when the rain stops coming, and when you feel like there isn't anything else to be thankful for but a blue sky, a light breeze, and the comfort of a stool to sit on, pull out that paper and read it again, remembering all that you have to be thankful for. Some of us have much more to be thankful for this year, and some of us less. But whatever the situation we find ourselves in this year, good or bad, we are offered the opportunity to remember always it is through our gratitude that we recognize and live out our blessings in the world. It's through the understanding of what the poet Mary Oliver said so well at a recent talk, that we can see what was always there, but slipped our minds in the headlong rush to make it through. Pay attention, she said. Be astonished and tell about it. We're soaked in distractions. The world didn't have to be beautiful. We can and should think about that beauty and be grateful.